Okay, so you guys were talking about like kids and like hope for the future. We kind of got there a roundabout way talking about Harry Potter, but it kind of reminded me of what we were talking about previously in Discord about like having black children, which we've talked about, like having black children and like sort of like, is it fair, you know, to kind of like bring black children into a certain type of world where the world is basically like fucked up. It's like all types of like isms and like racism and like sexism and like classism and like homophobia and like all this stuff. So you bring black children into a world that's kind of like automatically against them. Is that fair? Which we've talked about. And I know like you have a child. I don't have a child.
Neither does he.
Yeah.
He wants children though.
You want children.
Yeah.
So, and you also had said that you're from we're in Detroit. We're in Detroit, and y'all are both from Detroit, but you from different sides of Detroit?
Yeah, there's east side and there's west side of Detroit, and then there's southwest Detroit also, but that's mostly like Mexican town. But east side of Detroit, west side of Detroit, it's a thing. Like similar cultures, but like you grow up doing similar things.
Oh,
just
no,
at
he's shaking
different.
his head like no.
It is. You grow up doing similar things, but like in different key
where are you
areas.
from?
I'm from the west side.
And you from the
East
east side.
yeah.
So okay, so children. How do we feel about that? And how does that like have any relation to Detroit, growing up in Detroit? Because you're raising your son now in Detroit. How do you feel about that? Your black son.
It makes me really nervous. Had I known at 21, because that's how old I was when I had my son, and I always wanted a kid, and I always wanted a boy. Had I known then what I knew now, I probably wouldn't have had a kid. I didn't have as good of an understanding of the world at 21. Like I was like a little baby activist who like thought I knew some things, and then you get like a really rude awakening the older that you get. I probably wouldn't have had a child, but I'm a bit of a procrastinator. I'm not a big self-motivator. I have some issues with things like that, but my son is a constant push.
Right.
And so like I feel like children kind of keep us from remaining inactive and just letting things happen, because we're always thinking about the world that we gonna leave to our kids.
Right.
And so I think that they're a great motivator, and I think that like every child has something to offer. Every person has something to offer. Now, whether or not they're going to actually offer it, it's kind of up to them. You know, that's their decision. But, yeah, I feel like
it's good. It's worth it.
It's worth it.
No, what do you think?
No, I mean, like, just because, like, you talk about, like, you know, like, being motivation and parents taking these kids and using them to motivate themselves to go further, but they don't. Like, a lot of, like, you know, it's so much, like, so I work in a juvenile justice place where it's predominantly black. So it's like a bunch of 12 to 18-year-olds who've just, like, gotten into the system. Most of it starts with, like, CPS and stuff like that. And this is throughout, like, the Metro Detroit and Metro Detroit area. So, like, you have all these kids who don't get services, don't get the things they need. Like, parents are like fucked up because of generational stuff, and things happen and things recurring over time, and just like nobody gives a shit. And so like I think that the idea of like this is actually like we're usually on opposite sides of the spectrum.
It's an ongoing conversation.
I was saying, he's looking at you
it's an ongoing conversation.
Because I'm the optimist and she's the pessimist. Like,
I am not a pessimist.
She's the realist. This
Thank
is
you.
the thing that she is.
Realist. I'm a realist.
Yeah.
I'm also a realist.
Yeah, and reality is kind of negative. Like
Reality
it's so pessimism is just like realism. You know, but like no.
I was
but like,
gonna say from what you just said, but you still want kids.
Yeah, I still because like the thing about it is like the world is never gonna stop being fucked up.
Right.
And so like if the world is gonna stay fucked up, I just gotta raise my kid to not fall to the whims of the world, and that's a hard thing to do. But like at the end of the day, the world is still gonna need people who advocate, people who care, people who like are determined to make the world a better place. And if we stop producing these people because of how fucked up the world is, the world will never get better.
But no matter how you raise a child, and this is me speaking as a parent, no matter how you raise a child, no matter what values you instill with them, all you can do is give them like the core value of what you think is right, and then they take it, and what they decide to do with it is on them.
And make their own decision.
I say it all the time, like I want my son to be empathetic. I want him to be kind. I want him to love his people. I want him to be understanding. But I don't have any. I mainly just don't want my son to be somebody who I would cuss out on social media. But for the most part,
please don't be somebody I have to block. Please don't go be somebody that gets blocked.
But for the most part, like I have no say. Like I gave him, like I say it all the time, I grew him by his fingernails. Like, but I have no say in who he becomes.
Right.
So I can't say that I'm gonna have this child and put him out into the world so he can do all these great, amazing things. Like if he decides to do absolutely nothing with his life, it's his.
That could be okay too.
To do absolutely nothing with, it's his decision. So personally, I feel like if going by your decision, my love, then that's just selfish. Like, that's more selfish than just like not even thinking about having children. You're trying to project these things that they're automatically going to have to give to the world, whether they like it or not.
The way that I took what you said was more so of like you're black, and the idea of having like black children is almost like a hope. Not necessarily that you are trying to like make them, you want to make them be whatever, but it's kind of like they represent like hope that like the world could get better, that it like could be a better place, that it doesn't necessarily have to like remain the fucked up place that it is now, that like your children, your black children could be like hope for the future. And for me, that was what I kind of had to like come to terms with, because I went through a period where I which we talked about, you know, I went through a period where I really struggled, where I was just like, number one, I low-key like felt some type of way about like being born even, because I was just like, you know, like,
I didn't ask for none of this shit.
I didn't ask for shit, and I have been brought into like a really like fucked up ass world, like where like I'm black, like I'm a woman, like I have all these things that it's like there's like people that their whole existence is to just like destroy me basically as a person, like, and all these like systems and all this like infrastructure, all this stuff that's like designed basically for me to fail. And I was angry, like I kind of felt like you know, my parents, and like I had sort of like a stereotypical statistic type of upbringing, like I'm from BC, where all this like violence and like all this crime, and like my family had like all these problems, and like crack was like a big issue like in my family, you know, all this stuff.
Crack it all, it was hard.
and it's almost like you do reach a point where you just like God, like the world sucks, and it's almost like, why was I fucking born, and I have to like deal with all this shit that I didn't ask for. And even outside of even like the race stuff, like and like capitalism, like I think all the time about like living expenses. You have to have expenses to live. You have to like pay money just to live. It's like, I didn't ask to be born, but I have to pay money to be here. That makes no sense to me.
It's funny because those are already conversations that I'm trying to navigate with my 7-year-old that cracks him up, because
and I couldn't imagine having them type of conversations with a child.
Trying to teach him to be empathetic. These conversations that we have that he definitely does not understand now, but that I want him to be able to pull on later. I also find it very frustrating that, you know, the childhoods and the upbringings that we have pretty much dictate the people that we're going to be when we're older. And I feel like we can have all these empathy towards children. Like they just passed a law recently in Michigan that if kids aren't at reading level by the time they're in 3rd grade, they're holding them back, because they did a study over the course of 20 years, which I'm pretty sure they experimented on us. We'll get into the DPS school system later. But if children are not able to read by the time they aren't in the 3rd grade, it is very unlikely that they'll ever catch up. And so there are so many people who just flat out can't read, right? So you got these children who have limited resources, who really don't have a chance. Like, you can see a child born in a particular environment and with particular parents under a particular set of circumstances, and you can almost like pinpoint exactly how their life is going to go, which is why people like why the school to prison pipeline exists. We care about those children when they're children. Once they turn 18, 19, we get to this point where it's
do we really care about them when they're children?
Well, to a degree. Like,
I mean, they're still black.
Yeah,
but, you know.
in theory, like, people care, like, oh, that's so sad. You have some empathy for them. When they're 18, 19, and like they're stealing or they're committing crimes or they're violent, then it's like everybody had a rough childhood. You can't, like, all of those excuses fly out the window, and we're just ready to lock them up without any thought as to how they got there to the place that they got. And I find that extremely irritating.
But then you think about it, like, they already perceive, like, people perceive African American children. They did studies where they perceive African American children as like, what, 7 times older than what they are. So if you're 12, they already perceiving you as 19 anyway. So by the time
I'm sorry not to interrupt you, but I think your mic might have fell.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we like get what you're saying. No, you fine.
But they want to they already perceive you as being older than what you are. Yeah. So even if you 12 and you just like you prepubescent and shit, they already looking at you like you a grown man anyway. So like even then they don't give a fuck about you. So you have a very short window as a black kid of when they actually even care about you.
You know what frustrates me with that too is that, like, I get the rest of the world viewing that. I think what I've been struggling with the most lately is other black people. How and I get it. Like,
so I'm gonna have to say, when you say other black people, do we mean other black Americans?
Yes,
do we mean foreign blacks?
So
do we mean,
I
think ethnicity matters too.
I try to focus, like, I am a black American woman. I am from Detroit, born and raised. My mama was born here. My grandma was born here. Her mama came up from Mississippi because she was fleeing the Klan. So,
of course,
from off a plantation. So, I'm talking about black Americans. Now, I do understand that the trauma that comes along with poverty, which is like the core of everything. That there are a lot of black people in poverty, and poverty has all of these other effects. Whenever areas are more low educated or have like less economic ability and resources, there is more violence, there is more crime. That's true across the world. That is not just an us thing. Even understanding that, I think black Americans kind of got to a point, especially in like the 70s and 80s and 90s, where they kind of started fearing their own children. And so not only was the rest of the world kind of viewing them as older than they were at the time, so were their own people. A lot of people talk about like the whole Hillary thing, calling people super predators, and Joe Biden writing a crime bill, and Bill Clinton being really, you know, a big part in like the mass incarceration issue that we have
war
now.
On crime, war on drugs.
Yeah. But a lot of black Americans were okay with that because there was a lot of like petty crime.
Black Americans like loved Bill Clinton.
They still do. Oh my God.
Like to this day.
They still do. Like they love Bill Clinton. And like my mom's a Gen Xer, and just like other people in her generation, like when we were talking about like the Central Park 5, like I have not watched that documentary. I don't think I'm going to. I can't do it.
I don't think so either.
But like a lot of black people were really like, they wanted.
You know, I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad you said that, because I feel like there's definitely a generational divide, I guess you could say. I sort of think of it I don't know the exact like names of all the different generations, but I kind of feel like there was like my grandparents' generation,
so
which
probably
was
a boomer.
The boomers, okay. My grandparents' generation, which was like that was like the sort of 60s. They were like adults, like in the 60s, you know, and that was like the civil rights era. Like we fighting for integration, we fighting for our kids to go to school, we fighting for this, we fighting for that, which I think was very maybe like idealistic. Yeah. Like people had ideas about how they thought that like shit was gonna go. Like we're gonna like integrate the schools and integrate the neighborhoods and like everything's gonna be great. Which was some bullshit, right? Like I'm like, everybody knows like I'm a separatist. Like I'm not even like with the whole integration, which was assimilation. Basically they forced us to assimilate into their culture. And so I feel like you had like a lot of the times like our grandparents' generation, which was the 60s, which was, I feel like there was a belief, not even like intentionally, but there was a belief of like everything by white people was better. Like the white schools was better, the white man's ice is colder, everything. And then you had like our parents' sort of generation, which Gen X or whatever.
Gen Xers.
And that was like the 70s, 80s, early 90s of like, oh, like racism over, sort of like everything, like y'all gonna go to college and you're gonna like have all these opportunities. And then it was sort of like our generation that was kind of like looking around like, shit's not going away.
So here's how I look at that, and we've talked about that, right? So I don't disagree. I do think that integration was a problem. So at the time, the truth is that a lot of schools in white areas were better. Now I'm not talking about the quality of education, but just like they had books, they had
more resources.
They had resources, right? And the government just wasn't giving money to black schools.
Right.
And so I think it was less about just trying to get in with white people and just thinking like, I think everybody has just always been black people. I'm talking about us. When I say everybody, I'm talking about us.
Right.
Like have been just trying to get to this point of just decent living, just good living.
Yes.
And they just have, let me finish.
I'll go ahead.
And
I'm
feeling like you're the more radical one here.
No, believe it or not. No. He's a unicorn. He's like, we all gonna get there together. I'm ready to kick motherfuckers off the boat. It's like, you down?
Nobody makes it on the boat.
No. It'll just be me wrong by my goddamn self, but with the babies. But I feel like they were just trying to get to this place, and they didn't know how to do it, right? And so
that's why I say idealists. Like, you have ideas, but you don't necessarily know how to bring them to
fruition. So then they kind of got in there, and their children, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to keep doing these blue-collar jobs. Like, y'all go to college, and, like, this is how you get secure things. Because blue-collar jobs, like, they are good jobs. You make good money, but it's not always consistent, and so you can fall on ups and downs. So they thought that this was the route to go, so that's what their kids did.
And I feel like a lot of our parents along that same route bought into a lot of...
Because their parents
like the Bill Clinton era.
Their parents told them how to do it.
Yeah.
So when our parents like did all of these things the right way, and we watched it, like them pretty much give up their blackness, straighten their hair, and move their children into all white environments and all of this stuff, and you see that it didn't work, then we as millennials, because like we're up next, we get to look around and say,
it's not working.
That shit didn't work no way, so I'm gonna be as black as, and that's why I love these kids. Like, I'm gonna get as many tattoos as I want, I'm gonna wear my hair as I want, I'm gonna do what I like because they not gonna. I love the babies.
The kids are fucking dope.
The kids, and people act like Gen Z, the meme generation, they're so dumb and they're so this and that, and their faces are on the screen. And I feel like, nah, they smart.
They have a freedom, but you know what? And I just said it the other day, we raised them. Those are our kids. We taught those kids like how to protest, how to be expressive. I
would have kids watching my channel that was like, oh my god, like I'm 13, I'm 14, I'm 15, I love your channel. And I used to be like, oh my god, like you're 13? Like, what was I doing at 13? I was not watching.
We weren't, because
that was just started IM.
I was on AIM. I was on my sidekick on AIM talking about some dumb shit. I was not
ASL and shit.
Right.
Dial up.
Right.
No stream.
I was playing motherfucking Minesweeper. Like, I was not watching videos about
solitary while you play music.
The little ping-pong game.
I was not watching videos about black liberation.
No.
Like, I have 14-year-olds that's like, yeah, man, like I love your videos. Or like kids, because I have 5 years on YouTube. This year, August makes 5 years.
Wow.
And I've had like people hit me up like, yeah, I'm going to college this year. I've been watching your videos since I was like a freshman in high school, and you like helped me so much, and I like feel prepared to like go to school and like be black and be in like certain types of environments, and I started a zine and I did this and I did that, and I just be like, man, like these little kids are dope. They're cool. Like, I like them.
And I like that that's the generation that my kid is watching. Like he's watching these like younger artists, and even like the music that they make. My child loves what is this baby's name? YNW Melly.
Yeah. I don't know that.
I don't either, know. But he loves him. It's this.
You in touch because you got a kid.
It's this emo rap music that is like.
They love that.
It is,
they do.
But like they are so. And I listened to his song, and it's murder on my mind. He's talking about some murder that he did, that he didn't mean to do. But it's the first time I've heard a song about something violent where he's kind of talking about like the regret that came into it, and like how it wasn't something and so like just exploring like their feelings more. I feel like they're much more expressive. They're definitely more free. They are going into like we learned about like microaggressions and stuff like that kind of coming up. They already know like what to look for. They know more. They do.
They just have more access.
They do.
Because of the internet. Like the internet for most millennials, especially like maybe unless you're like a super young millennial, but
because you got Beyonce on the like 38, 39,
yeah, like Mark Zuckerberg, but it's like for most millennials, by the time the internet like really got like popping, you was already like a teenager, right? You know, you was already to a certain age. But like for this like next generation coming up, their whole lives they've had access to like all this information, all these resources of just like I can look up whatever I want. I can look up this, I can look up that. I can go on YouTube. I can watch this. I can watch that. I can find this.
No, they don't.
That.
They don't. Like, and that's
I mean, they can't. Not saying that they always do take advantage of it, but they can. Yeah. Like I remember, like when I was super young, if I wanted to look something up, I had to like take my ass to the library, go look in Encyclopedia Britannica, flip to
this dictionary, and
flip to the encyclopedia, and the encyclopedia only came out like once every year. So it was like not always the most up to date.
But just how they teach themselves how to like play instruments and how to make beats.
And they're more intuitive.
They are so so intuitive. But like I get into, because I have a sister who's 16, and then my mother, and like she gets so frustrated because she's like, you can Google everything and she doesn't look anything up, and she gets frustrated with like anybody not knowing anything because there's no excuse. But I feel like that's when we get back to parenting, because like, and I know like I want my a Yo Google Not Broke t-shirt. I have to get it. But the thing is that so
it's not.
when I had a question when I was a child, like if I asked my mother what something meant, she would be like, look it up, and she would give me the first 3 words, and then I would go and look it up, and then she would come back and ask me what it meant to make sure that I did it. And that's a skill that I learned. That's a skill. I was taught to do that. So now whenever I have a question on something, I'm Googling stuff all day in the middle of a movie. Like, we're like, who is this? And I'm Googling, oh, that's such and such. And he's like, could this wait? But I do that like automatically because I've been conditioned to do it. Everybody doesn't grow up being taught that skill. And so I have to remind myself constantly. I have been for the last like 4 or 5 years trying to show my people grace, trying to be patient with the fact that everybody doesn't have these skills that to me are just like obvious. Just look it up, but it doesn't occur to people. Once people have a random thought, I wonder what that means, and then it just goes by. Like they aren't gonna go.
And I would say that the flip side of the sort of Generation Z having access to the resources is sort of like getting your information from like bullshit ass sources.
True.
Like getting your information from like Shade Room, or getting your information from Facebook, getting your information from not fact check.
But that's not even a them thing.
Believing it just because you're saying.
But that's because our whole election was pretty much predetermined by like fake Facebook articles.
Yeah, there's a lot of
older
like
people aren't checking. But like, is that a thing? Because I feel like we live in a society, and we always have, because that's the only way like a society like capitalism or even a monarchy will work, is if the people sort of blindly follow what authority says is a thing. Yeah. So I don't even think we can just put that on them. Like, as much as older people like to say, you kids don't look up
it's not just them.
Yeah, I think people in general aren't.
I mean, like, young kids don't even really use Facebook like that. It's like older people that be on Facebook.
Yeah, people in general are not all that inquisitive about most things. That's definitely something that I think that I've learned growing up. We kind of, I don't want to say beaten children, but we grow children out of their inquisitiveness as they get older.
Well, you guys said something about like Detroit public schools, which I want to get to. But I want to say that like the public school, like the United States public school system was designed, it was like literally designed to train people to go work in factories, right? So it does not train children to be creative, to be inquisitive, to ask questions. It trains you to memorize. It trains you to learn how to do a skill. Can you memorize this, and can you sort of replicate it? It gives you the skills to ultimately go work in a factory where you're like probably going to do the same thing over and over, because like for the longest time that's what our American economy was. You go work in the factory where you do the same thing every day. So it's like you go to school, you be in school for 8 to 9 hours, you sit at your desk, you write, you memorize, you learn certain things. You're learning these skills that allow you to eventually go work in a factory. But this like, then it's like the economy like changed. The factories like died. We here in Detroit, there's somebody out there. Yeah. The factories died. We here in Detroit, the factories died. And now you have, but
the
like
factories die every 10 or 20 years or something, don't they?
So often they need to just die for good. Because like, and you pay for everything that I got, but still.
They're never.
And it's like, and now you have like all these people, society that's being stilled because the school systems have not sort of adjusted, shifted, especially when we talk about public schools and in black American communities especially, that have not adjusted for the way that things have changed, that you're still sort of being taught to like sit still, memorize things that you can go quote unquote work in a factory.
And we know by studies that children don't, like, the best way for children to learn is to sit still and have someone speak at them.
Exactly.
But then even when they try and change things, and like people get so old man yells at sky like on things like back in my day, because like people, I talk to so many parents who are so outraged that their children don't learn how to write in cursive anymore. And it is a useless skill. Like, I
will say, and you know I've talked about this, I don't like that the kids don't learn how to tell time. A lot of kids like do not know how to tell analog time. They can't read a clock. They just know how to read like digital numbers. And I'd be like, you can't tell time. You cannot tell time. If I show you a real actual analog clock and you'd be like, I don't know what that shit. it's a 12 and a 3. I don't know.
Like, as technology progresses, like things like that become antiquated, and so it won't be necessary. Like it's very unlikely that there will be any outside of like Big Ben.
I hate it.
Like it's so like it's just I'm
a hater.
I'm arguing with people like, why does your child? Because back when like school was just a thing that rich people did, it was like calligraphy, and it's like nobody needs to know this. Like how often do most people just in their regular life write in cursive?
I mean, when you sign your signature, you gotta know how to.
But whose signature is actually in cursive? A good signature isn't gonna be in cursive. It's gonna be like some complicated.
That's bullshit, though. Like cursive itself as a skill, like I mean, like everything you need can be used. So if I get a handwritten book or some shit, like I don't know, like specialized skills are still impressive.
Specialized skills are still.
I don't know. I might want to like you to write me a love letter or something.
So then make it a class in college or something. Make it an elective. Make cursive handwriting.
You know how I feel about college.
You got a master's degree.
It don't like college is bullshit. Let's not act like it.
I've been hustling my high school diploma. He's got a master's degree, and like my mother, if she ever sees this, bless her heart, my mother just feels like I am going to just one day be out here
to try it.
on my knuckles if I don't get at least an associate.
But even like, that, you like that's what we talk about because it's a social degree.
What's
like,
your master's in?
Social work. So like
first of all, he out here doing that work. He's out here saving the babies.
First of all, don't do that. Don't do that.
He's out here saving the babies.
But like even that, like the work that's actually be done, like especially in Detroit, like it's a lot of trans work that's being done. But like just so much trans work. Like you have Trans Sisters of Color. You have all these programs that's led by these trans women who like some of them have like master's degrees and these like professional degrees, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them just come from experience, and that's like those are the people that are most able to even do the work.
You know what's funny? It's almost like when you have too much education and stuff like that, it's almost like, but where is your real world experience?
Mm-hmm.
Where is your real world knowledge? Mm-hmm. You've been in school for like 20,000 million bajillion years, and that's cute, that's fine. But when we're talking about food equity, when we're talking about like actual real black people that are living in poverty, that do not have access, can you talk to them? Can you understand them?
I am so like I love that. And you have talked about that as well, where I feel like I can't stand, even though I am like a bit of a thinker, like I can't stand like black intellectuals because I feel like
I feel about black academics.
We have all of these things that even like well-intentioned people are advocating for. We want to talk about social justice reform and equal things for women, but we don't talk about these people. When we are talking about prison reform, why aren't we talking to felons? Why aren't we talking to people who are currently incarcerated, who've been incarcerated for long periods of time? When we're talking about poverty, why aren't we talking to poor people? Why aren't we giving them a platform? Like maybe they aren't going to clean up as well and have the right verbiage and like be all fancy and stuff like that. But that's who we need to speak to because there's a disconnect. There are people who have absolutely no idea just how bad a lot of people have, like just how poor some people are. Remember a few years ago that young girl had the baby that fell through the floor into the basement and drowned in sewage. The girl's basement had like flooded. And she'd just been living like that because the landlord wouldn't fix it and she couldn't afford to get it done. There was a hole in the floor because a lot of people who live in the city of Detroit are living in conditions that aren't really much better than like third world. No running water, no electricity unless you know how to turn it on. Yeah, or it's like a lot of lead here too. And you know, it's one house on the block and it looks like it should be condemned. And she had like a baby was like 1 or something. There was some kind of hole in the kitchen. There's a hole in the kitchen floor. Baby falls through. She didn't hear it happen. The baby drowns in the basement that had flooded and that she had just been living with for like weeks, I think. But then I'll have a conversation with like some black kid who grew up in Southfield, which is like a suburb or something, with both of his parents, and like, yeah, Black Americans have privilege. It's better to be poor here than it is to anybody else in the world. And when you're talking to poor people, it doesn't matter if it would be easier to be poor somewhere else. I'm poor now.
The Struggle Olympics. But that's all it is. People love the struggle.
Oppression Olympics.
Yeah.
That shit makes me so angry. Because, like, for example, like, I'm from D.C. It's parts of D.C., for example, that have really high AIDS rates. Mm-hmm. And my whole life has been like that. AIDS rates that are higher than, people always talk about, like, AIDS in Africa. Mm-hmm. That's, like, a thing, right? There's parts of D.C. that have higher AIDS rates than, like, in Africa. And so it's wild to me when people be like, you're a black American, you live in the United States, like you have all this privilege. Like to an extent, obviously, yes, that's true. Mm-hmm. But it's wild to me the way that people downplay that there are fucking American cities where like black Americans are living in poverty, are living in conditions that are like quote unquote like third world conditions. It's parts of the nation's capital where you literally have AIDS rates that are higher than in Africa. You have places in the United States, black American cities, where it's like third world conditions, and nobody cares.
Like here in Detroit, it's in Wayne County. In Wayne County, the infant mortality rate and the maternal mortality rate is higher here than it is in several third world countries, mostly because of malnourishment. So even though people are overweight or something like that, like the babies are being born malnourished because there's no nutrition in the food that they get because of food deserts and things like that.
But this is the thing. We're talking about a conversation where, like, the people who actually, like you were talking about before, where the people who actually need to say something are never going to be able to say that. It's never going to happen. You want to know why it's never going to happen? It's because people with privilege are the ones who are portrayed in the media.
Who are running the narrative.
They're writing the narrative. They're going to decide what's being shown, what other people are going to see. Of course, if I had never met an actual poor, like, very disenfranchised African American, I'm not going to know what the fuck that looks like. So I'm just going to go off of what I see on TV. So, or in media.
And just like, so when we talk about like gentrification and stuff like that, black millennials can be just as harmful to an environment as the white people that come in.
I think there's a lot of people that just are out of touch with reality.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds, I don't know, mean or whatever to say, but I think there's a lot of people, and this is why, and I hate black academics. I have a whole video where I'm just like, I hate black, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I have a whole video that's literally called, like, I hate black academics.
She hates so many things.
I hate everything. I have a video called I hate everything. Like, I just don't like anything. I don't like nothing. But that's part of why I hate black academics too, because it's like, you know, you sit in your classrooms and you read and you study, and like, that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, it's like, if you will become out of touch with reality. You will not understand what's going on in the real world, because all you're reading are these books, these studies, and I love a study. Obviously, I read a lot of studies. I know a lot of numbers.
Studies and articles,
but at the same time, you also have to have perspective of what's going on in the real world, because even every single study there's a filter. Like, it's filtered through something, through whatever, you know, like you can go back and you can read studies where they use studies to say that like black people were inferior, you know, they use like quote unquote studies. Every study is also still filtered through a bias. So it's also wild to me to hear people be like, well, you know, I saw the study and the study said that like averages, I feel like averages get manipulated a lot.
Oh, so much.
People be like, your average black American is living X, Y, and Z type of way. And it's like, that's because you have people that are super rich that living a certain type of way that are manipulating the study, because an average literally is just, it's an average. It's like a sort of a middle point. So you have people that are on an extreme on either end. You have people that are living in extreme wealth. You have black Americans that are living in extreme poverty. So don't tell me that the average black American is living good, when I can literally tell you, I can go to a neighborhood in DC and look and see with my own eyes, I see it, how they're living, but then you tell me that all black Americans is living perfectly fine. Because you read a study.
These people don't know black people in real life, and I think that
what you talk about, like, they don't know black Americans in real life.
You niggas don't know no niggas, and that is something that has like frustrated me to know, and like
I've seen you talk about it more than once.
Because it like every day it becomes more and more proven. Like I hate the whole people get money and they want to move their kids out of the city, and I understand, okay, because the city can be rough. So you want your kids to have, so you put them in an all white environment. One of the
so we're talking about in Michigan and Detroit.
Yeah, Michigan. Okay. So you live your parents are from Detroit. They move you to Rochester Hills,
Bloomfield Hills,
somewhere where like you the only black person in your class, and one other person like that looks like you in your classroom. So you grow up and then like you don't know how to interact with your own people, and I see that as a thing that happens. So those are the people who grow up to be the people who are like black people. People always say that I sound white when I talk just because I use proper English. I speak fairly properly, but I sound black. Nobody.
I hate those
we
people.
know what white sounds like. I answer phones all day, every day.
I love anime and black people tease me. No, they didn't, you fucking liar. You love Dragon Ball Z, liar.
liked Harry Potter, and I love to read. I like comic books and comic book movies and Lord of the Rings, and I was a whole nerd out here. There was never anything, any interest that I ever had in my life where there was not a community of black people really fucking close by for me to be able to communicate with. And so like my son, like I make sure I take him to like black cosplay events. We went to YumaCon, which is like an anime Comic Con sort of thing. A bunch of like black folks dressed up and they, you know, they Black Panther and they Storm and they whatever, so that he can see like it, whatever you're into, there are other black people who are into it. But people like isolate themselves from their people. They find excuses, or they only grow up with a certain type of people and they don't really know how to interact with their own culture. And I think that's sad. I feel like violent is too dramatic. But I don't think that's a dramatic word. It's horrible to...
It can be considered violent.
Yeah, to have a black child that doesn't know how to interact with other black people. And you see that happen so much. It's the saddest fucking thing I've ever seen. Also irritating. It's irritating as all hell. Because I hate to hear, I've never had any problem relating to my people.
But you got to talk about the demographics of like this region of Michigan and the way it's set up. Like, so it's an extremely segregated area. So when you talk about Dearborn, which is mostly for our Middle Eastern people, Southwest Detroit is for the Mexicans, or I'm sorry, like Spanish American. So you like some kind of descent like that.
It's a high population of Mexican people.
Seriously,
it's a high population.
You can say whatever you want.
So,
and then you have like your Bloomfields and your Troys, your Rochester that's full of white people and stuff like that. So
East Asian is like Novi and stuff like that. Indians and stuff like that. Like still Asian, but the darker Asian people are somewhere else.
And like
really segregated.
Really. Detroit hasn't even always been a predominantly black city and stuff like that. But like when you talk about how they paved through Black Bottom and stuff like that, so we had a region where we had like black business, we had these black flourishing neighbors, like this black flourishing area and stuff like that. And instead of that being a thriving area, they paved through it. And like
the freeway, right?
Yeah, 375.
Yep.
So like they paved through it and like it displaced a lot of black businesses.
Southfield Freeway too.
Yeah, like they do this, like it's very intentional the way they set up Detroit. And like now over the last couple of years, you had like these people who like they were like Detroit was going to fuck through it. Like they had it, they sent it through it. Like
we didn't have, it was dark.
There
were no street lights. And when you're talking about a city, again, a lot of poverty, so there's a lot of violence, it was dark in the city. There were no street lights. You were just driving down the area.
But it was intentional.
They use the term urban blight.
It was intentional because the setup is we're gonna make this shit so uninhabitable that niggas gonna move out of the city and we're gonna bribe this bitch for next to nothing, which is exactly what the fuck happened.
That's it.
And so now we're running into like all these displaced black people who are even more displaced now. Now they're going for better schools, better opportunities, which they had to do. What is DPS is barely fucking open, ain't it? Is it even open?
It's like 3 DPS schools.
2.5 schools with 3 rats and no running water. Like it's fucked up.
I think they delayed the beginning of the school year because like there was an influx of lead, or they thought there might have been an influx of lead. I remember DPS
fucked up out
there.
We got to DPS.
It was rough. So I went. So there are. And now I'll be trying not to sound like a hotep, but there are certain things that are true, right? So you've got DPS schools, you've got your neighborhood schools, and then you've got these 3 schools that you funnel all of your smart black children to. Pure elitism.
It's 2 now.
King is gone?
King is off that fucking list.
So Martin Luther King Junior High School, Cass and Renaissance, and you had to take a test to get in, and that's where all of the smart kids went. So a lot of colleges and things like that like put an emphasis on going to some of those schools. I did go to Cass for 3 years. And then Cooley, Mumford, Osborne, like
Persian.
Those are like your neighborhood high schools. It was rough. That's where your metal detectors and your sawed-off shotguns are in the locker and everything.
Dog. I went into Persian. That motherfucking school, it was a pile of trash just sitting in the middle of the floor that kids was walking the fuck over. Yeah. They didn't wind them the fuck down, but they was walking over the pile of trash. I'm like, niggas live like this.
I think at one point, Cody was actually Eastside High. All they needed was Morgan Freeman coming there.
Not Morgan Freeman. We're gonna get kicked out of this hotel.
Okay. No, but like so.
We're being a little too black. So, somebody might knock on the door, but they answer the door if they come tell us be quiet.
I remember
that happened in Atlanta. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I'm not sure. I remember bathroom stalls didn't have doors. At one point, I was in a high school, and my mom would get upset because my sister would skip class, and my mom was like, nobody ever calls. But at one point, there were like 60 students registered to be in one class, and so we were
60.
Yes, and so when kids didn't show up, the teachers were thrilled because she had nowhere for their ass to sit. No way. So,
yeah, stay your ass home.
So there were like, so we would have a desk. One person would have a desk, and we would sit 3 to a desk to 1 book. Because, and like, we never got homework because,
group project.
Yeah, group project. No, that was just regular reading. We never got homework. We never got homework because, you know, there wasn't a book to take home. And I went to Cass, 9th grade, and that's like one of the top tiered schools. Not even, they stay in Michigan, but most of the time I talk to white folks from somewhere they've never heard of it. So it's mainly just where the smart kids, like in the inner city, go. Because have you ever heard of Cass Tech? Yeah, Big Sean went there.
Look at you.
But my entire 9th grade year, I didn't have science. We went to the auditorium every single day for science. He came. I don't know if my science teacher was sick or if he just didn't like our ass no more. But I didn't have a science teacher.
That reminds me, like, we was just in Flint. We was talking to Savannah in Flint, and she was like, "Yeah, after 9th grade, there's really no school."
Yeah.
She was like, there's like a handful of high schools, like a few high schools. You can either go, but it'd be like mad overcrowded.
And then they started shutting down high schools, and like the kids would just get merged, and that's how you ended up with 60 people as well. But then, because impoverished areas, so now we've got rivaling neighborhoods and rivaling gangs being forced into the same school. So now that's the thing.
And not even just that. If you look at like charter schools in like Detroit specifically, so like charter schools don't have to accept everybody. Right. So they were taking like even those kids that were getting funding, like in the DPS system, the kids that were getting funding because they were like excelling for whatever reason, because like that shit was a miracle. But for whatever reason they were excelling. The charter schools started taking smart for no fucking reason. Don't nobody know where that shit came from. It's just here. But like,
ooh, good luck, nigga. You smart.
You's a good nigga. You gonna make it.
Master gonna let me work in that big house.
Okay, I'm on the stove.
On the stove?
On the stove.
Yeah, Tony.
Listen. But they started taking all these kids that was good, so like even the little bit of government dollars that these DPS schools were getting, they started pulling them into charter schools, and it was like just
which you can't fault the parents because when they went, but at the same time we can't. But parents also don't understand that charter schools doesn't also like because
charter schools aren't really. So something like that happened to me. So in DC, I went to DCPS. I went to DC public schools. I will never forget. Like I was a kid. I was in like 4th grade. My 4th grade teacher literally pulled my mom aside and was like, listen, your daughter's like really smart. If I were you, I would take her out of public schools. I would put her in private school, or I would put her in a charter school, because charter schools in DC are also like a thing. Like, put your kids in the charter school. And now it's gotten to the point in DC where they literally be having like lotteries because people don't want to put their kids in public school. So they have, and the charter schools can only take but like quote unquote so many, and now they have the whole like school choice, which the whole point of that is we want to take our money out of these like predominantly black public schools. Because like fuck these schools, and we want to put our money in the private schools and in the charter schools. And the fucking teacher literally told my mom, like, your daughter's really smart. I don't think we should keep her in the public schools with these other black kids. And this was a black teacher. And my mom said to the teacher, she was like, well, I think that even though I agree with you that my daughter is fucking smart as fuck, in addition to her intellectual development or whatever, my mom was like, I think that it's also important for her to be around her black peers. I think that that's an equal part of her development, so I want to keep her in public school with her black peers so she can grow up with an understanding of the fact that like she's black.
You have to know how to coexist with your people. You just have to, like, it's just,
and I'm sure that there's other parents that would have been in that situation that would have yanked me out of public school, put me in private school with the white kids,
and I've talked to a lot of these people now, like a lot of like older people who said they took their kids to these like predominantly white schools, and one guy, he's like super pro-black, and both of his sons just married like anyway, so and it's just, you know, or they, you know, they have a really hard time. They're dealing with a lot of racism, and their kids are struggling, and it's just like, or they bouncing around from high school to high school. The teachers are picking on them because they genuinely are just like also racist, and so it's like, well, what are you, or they kid, or you got black kids like getting on meth and stuff like that. Niggas don't do meth.
Meth
like
is
that.
such a
That's
big
not to
thing.
take away from my brothers and sisters struggling with meth.
Detroit?
No, in Detroit.
Yes.
Recently.
No, the gay girls do.
The girls
they go
doing
up
meth?
for some Tina. They go up for Tina.
Wow.
But like, I mean, you know, like, I mean, it's the way that all like drugs do. Like,
Yeah.
it gets funneled down.
It
and,
does.
You know,
I know that like heroin is making a comeback in New York, shooting up.
It's
Big comeback.
Let's talk about. So at one point, I worked for a city. I did 911 dispatch. I worked midnights. I would get to work at 10 o'clock. By 11, every single night for like a solid month, because I was on a rotating shift, I would have 4 OD calls.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like in a predominantly like white area, and a lot of the times they were like repeat houses, and I would just be sitting there wondering, like,
nigga, you OD'd yesterday.
but not only that, like,
as soon as I get out, I'm getting high. Right back. I'm not gonna wait.
How are they not in jail? So like, you know they got drugs there. Don't people go to jail for that? Don't people go to jail for having drugs?
When we're talking about white people,
We all saw it, kind of just grew up with crackheads, and it was just a thing. But I've never just
you
saw
was
it.
like, oh,
But they were just people who had always smoked crack.
And then you didn't see them on the corner one day. And you was like, damn, I hope they're all right. I hope they ain't OD.
No.
And then you see them on the corner again, and so you'd be like, oh, you good?
Can we talk?
I'm glad.
No.
crackheads.
Can we talk about that? Because that's a beautiful thing. So there is a man who I don't know if he's a mental or he's a drug addict. Usually those things kind of go hand in hand. The mental people who live on the street. It's a law enforcement term, so if that's like offensive to some people, I'm sorry, but like that's what we like professionally like have to call it. There's some sort of mental disorder there.
Okay. Oh, am I too far over?
Yeah, you rolled back.
Sorry,
But
I rolled back. My bad.
you get these people who like they have their spots, because like the homeless, and they have territories, like it's gang wars, and he's always there in the wintertime. Like he doesn't bother anybody, he doesn't panhandle, he's just out there talking to himself, living his life. In the wintertime we give him gloves, in the summertime we making sure he has water, and when you don't see him for a while, like you will have like these people who be like, you seen such and such, you see, like my neighbors will all be like, have you seen him, where he at? And we'll get to like calling around, we don't know, and that is like, those are aspects of the black community that I absolutely love. And I remember like this officer came and was bothering him because some hating ass person called the police and said,
White person.
He was out there with all of his things, like, you know, he got shirts and all kind of stuff. He puts like his t-shirt or his coat on a fire hydrant that's right there, and the fire hydrant just be posted up with a Carhartt on. But like they were bothering him. Everybody came by, right? Leave him alone. He always out here. He ain't hurt nobody, and blah blah blah. And so yeah, those people who are on drugs, they've always been on drugs. You don't see them for a while, and you know to ask about them. That's why I find it so strange whenever people say stuff like, "Oh, black people need to come together. We don't take care of each other like we used to." That's really not true.
That's not us.
That's not true.
I feel like that's not black Americans at all.
Yeah.
Part of our culture is literally like taking care of each other because nobody else will.
Nobody.
Literally.
We were just having this conversation not too long ago, because I have a friend who she's not black, so I was telling her how about like raising other people's kids, and like how people call aunties and uncles and stuff like that. So we were just talking about like raising each other's kids and how it's something that we always did, and she
Friends
just
of the family.
yeah, and she just didn't understand. She was like, but they're not blood, and I'm trying to tell her like, but it doesn't matter because like they still need, and
they
since
might
I
as
have,
well
we're
be
gonna
blood.
get
And I feel like that's like a strength that we have, because and that comes from slavery, because like children would just get taken and just given to some woman on a plantation. Because I was wondering about that, like after liberation, children weren't always moved to different plantations like with their parents. Like who took care of these random children that like were just there, who were just somebody just bought a 7-year-old, and now this 7-year-old is just here when it's time for everybody to go. Like who took this child? And us having to like just identify with like all black people, it's a blessing and a curse. I do feel like we've been able to progress as far as we have. Take that however you will on any given day, but the only reason that we made it is because we've been able to just identify with just blackness. You black, I'm black, we gonna rock this shit out together. If we did not do that, if we were divided up and tribal and only, you know, fucked with like whoever, we wouldn't have made it. We really would. I mean, we barely made it now. But we definitely wouldn't have gotten as far as we have. I think that's going away though.
Like it used to be the one drop rule. Like, and if you was black, if you even had a drop, you was black. And so like, but that's going away. Like blackness is being identified differently now than it has been like in the past.
I agree.
Like, cause if you think about it, like, you know, like you were able to identify every other thing any way that you want. So like, especially like mixed kids and different things like that. Now it's like, I'm not black, I'm biracial.
I'm biracial.
And that's a whole thing. And like, it's something to be respected.
I think it depends. Well,
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yes, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think it depends, because you also have some like biracial kids, for example, that they just look black and they just be like, I'm black, like I'm black, I look black, I have a quote unquote black experience, I'm visually black, I'm perceived as black, I'm treated as society as black, not other. And so I think it really depends on how you look. I always use like J. Cole as an example. J. Cole clearly identifies as black.
And
he married a black woman.
He looks black.
Right?
He looks black.
But then on the other end of that spectrum, you might have somebody like.
Come out. J. Cole don't look like.
He looked like a mixed kid.
No, he just looks like a light skinned black dude.
No
You look more like a mixed kid than J. Cole.
Out of here. And me and that nigga look like we both mixed with some other shit.
Yeah. No, he looks.
But nappy hair, big nose, big lips.
He just
looks light skinned.
He has that kind of like that thing that biracial.
The biracial thing to me would be like Halsey, Logic.
And first of all, when they said she was black, I flat out didn't believe it. I had
She'd be
such
like,
a hard time with it.
Exactly. And to me, that's more of like the biracial, like a are you or aren't you. There's all this confusion. There's all this like ambiguity. To me, that's the biracial look. When you have like fucking biracial people like, to me, a J. Cole or like a Lauren London or you know, somebody that's pretty much like I am black, I look black, I have always been perceived as black, that's just what I am.
Yeah.
And that's how they identify and that's how they move through the world because of how they look visually. Like, people have always asked me, for example, like, how do I feel about the N-word? And I'd be like, listen, if you run the risk of being called the N-word, which I'm sure J. Cole runs the risk of being called the N-word.
The nigga look like a nigga to me.
Right. I'm sure Lauren London has like ran the risk of being called the N-word, you know, like stuff like that. But like somebody like, again, like a Halsey or a Lauren London. No, you don't. Lauren London, a Halsey or a Logic. Yeah. You don't run the risk. You really don't. Yeah. We know you don't run the risk of being called the N-word. So that just means that you're having a different type of experience in your life. Like, not to invalidate you or whatever. But you're having a different, like you're having a different experience.
I also, and maybe this makes me awful, I also find it extremely irritating that
they're just outside talking.
They more so complain about their experiences kind of like with black people not accepting them. I mean, you do have some people like, I'm not accepting the white
Yeah, they be crying a lot.
But it's more so
like, a lot of tears.
Everybody expects, like, black people, we just the Hufflepuff of racists. Like, I'll take them all. I'll take the lot. And it's like, you know.
Which is beautiful. Shout out to Hufflepuff.
I fuck with them. But, no, but like, I feel like this, when we start talking about the one drop rule, which is like a racist construct, I also get like
fucking love
I just feel like if you
I also get irritated.
I don't care.
But I also get irritated with like black people who will say stuff like you know, you're super woke. You were just talking about the woke thing. Your woke black folks is like, black Americans gotta stop acting like they the gatekeepers to blackness. We all black, and the American experience isn't the only experience that matters. No. But then they'll be like, they black and I'm black because of the one drop rule. It's like, but the one drop rule is a very American thing. Like, blackness isn't even expressed the same way everywhere.
If we about to get into this conversation, I need a break.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm about to go pee.
That's how real we go.
We about to get real. You decided you wanted to get real. Y'all don't have to unmic. I'm about to pee.
She said she had to pee on camera.
I'm about to come back because
I'm here for it.
You decided you wanted to get really, really real.
Oh, this is fun.
I'll be right back.